It's time for our 49ers playoff reset. They have clinched NFC West. They're playing Washington this week. The goal has shifted from just clinching a playoff spot to now trying to secure the best playoff seeding possible. So that all means that it's possible to talk about potential playoff matchups now without jinxing anything, as some of you would complain. And boy, the league is set up to be so fun over the next month plus. Just wait until I get into some of this stuff. It is going to be epic. I don't know what's going to happen, but we can predict what's going to happen. We could look at some of the statistical models. We can talk about the X's and O's, the tape, the matchups, anything you want. The NFL has got this figured out, though. And let me just give you a little sneak preview of what we might talk about. 49ers versus Cowboys NFC title game. Is it really possible? And, just looking at the seedings right now, looking at what might happen moving forward, considering some of the news that just came out. Jalen Hurts today reported shoulder injury. Yes, a 49ers Cowboys NFC title game, which would be the most epic out of any possible NFC title game matchup, is indeed possible. So, wanted to squeeze this in before Monday Night Football. We have the Rams visiting the Green Bay Packers today. Both teams on playoff life support. The Rams are 4-9, so they're not going to be going anywhere. But Baker Mayfield makes that semi-interesting now, right? We'll see how he does now that he has more practice under his belt, since playing the Raiders with no practice under his belt actually ended up being a very good thing for him and the Rams. Well, it did worsen their draft positioning, but who cares if you're the Rams, since you don't have any draft picks anymore. Anyway, I digress. Packers, Aaron Rodgers, they might actually factor big into the 49ers playoff path, because the Green Bay Packers play the Minnesota Vikings on New Year's Day when the 49ers are playing the Raiders. And obviously the Vikings just mounted the biggest comeback in NFL history. So the Vikings remain the 2 seed. And if we're going to reset the playoff picture, we might as well put it up on the screen. Here you go. Top of the screen, Eagles 1 seed. We're going to get into that Jalen Hurts news soon. Vikings 2 seed. They've clinched the NFC North. 49ers 3 seed. They've clinched the NFC West. And the Cowboys have clinched a playoff berth, but they have not clinched their division yet. They can do so. Actually, the Eagles can do so against the Cowboys. The Cowboys are long shots to win the NFC East, but they can do so by winning 3 straight, while the Eagles lose 3 straight, which I do not think is going to happen. That, by the way, would also be the only way that the 49ers potentially attain the 1 seed, winning 3 straight while the Eagles lose 3 straight. And, despite the fact that Jalen Hurts does have a reportedly sprained shoulder, and there might be a little bit more to this than just what the Eagles and Hurts' agent are putting out. We'll talk about that in a second. But despite the fact that he has the sprained shoulder, it is still an absurdly long shot for a team as good as the Philadelphia Eagles to lose 3 straight games. So I would all but rule out the number 1 seed for the 49ers, or for the Minnesota Vikings for that matter. I would look at this playoff picture right here, and I'd say that the Eagles are essentially locked in to be number 1 for all intents and purposes. And the jockeying here is for 2 and 3. The division champion will get either 2 or 3 between the 49ers and the Vikings, unless the Cowboys obviously surge. But you have to look at, these 2 teams as the favorites for 2 or 3, and the 49ers being the division champions that they are, and Dallas won't be a division champion if they don't pass Philadelphia. So I digress on that point. But 2 and 3, essentially between the 49ers and the Vikings, that is reserved for the division title winners. And the 49ers are a game behind the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings at 11-3, 49ers at 10-4. So Minnesota plays the New York Giants next. The Giants just beat Washington on Sunday Night Football. And then Minnesota heads to Green Bay. I talked about Green Bay play. They're on the bubble right here. So that means their playoff hopes are on life support. 5-8. The Detroit Lions have a much better chance. After playing Green Bay, the Minnesota Vikings have to travel to face Chicago. The Bears have already been eliminated, but they played the Eagles fairly close yesterday. So anything is possible. We're going to be looking at these Vikings games with great interest over the next 3 weeks, because they just barely, it took the largest comeback in NFL history to beat the Colts, who might be the worst team in the National Football League. Colts, though, still not officially eliminated, which is crazy, at 4-9-1. That just shows you how much parity there is in the league. But the 49ers can theoretically get up to the number 2 seed, and that would do a couple of things. The first of which, it would be that the 49ers would play the 7 and not the 6. So if the playoffs ended today, the 49ers would play the Washington Commanders. So you can look at this game coming on Saturday for the 49ers as a playoff preview of sorts, because the 49ers are going to play a team which is around the caliber of the Washington Commanders. Today, if the playoffs started today, the 49ers are the 3. They'd play number 6. They'd play the New York Giants. But the Giants are around the same caliber of team as the Commanders, as you saw in yesterday's close game. Now, it's also possible, based on the seedings right here, that the 49ers play the Seahawks or they play the Detroit Lions. The Lions are a really interesting one to me because they're playing better than any of these teams. The Giants, Commanders, Seahawks, Lions, out of those 4, the Lions are playing the best football. Number 10 or 11 DVOA. The offense under Jared Goff has actually been really good. Defense, not as much, but the Lions are a dark horse as we come toward the playoffs. But 49ers 2, Vikings 3. It's probably going to be, interchangeable between these two teams. The team with the higher seeding, assuming they both win their wild card games at home, would host a divisional playoff matchup between Minnesota and San Francisco. Assuming that all goes through, then you'd have the Eagles with a bye, and the Eagles playing the lowest remaining seed, which if if Minnesota wins, beating either the 6 or the 7, depending on if they're the 2 or the 3, that would be either the Cowboys or the Buccaneers if things hold as they are right now. So assume that Dallas beats Tampa Bay. That would send Dallas to Philadelphia for the divisional round. Or, hey, Tampa Bay could go to Philadelphia for the divisional round. And that is where Jalen Hurts' shoulder status is most intriguing. Because the Cowboys would be a really, really good 4 seed, right? The Cowboys would be a team that probably, you see it right now, they're favored over the Eagles this coming Sunday, or is it Saturday? It's this weekend. They're favored over the Eagles this weekend because the Eagles probably won't have Jalen Hurts. There was a report that came out right before all the national reports today that said that Jalen Hurts broke his collarbone. It came from like a local news anchor in Charleston, South Carolina. And everybody was like, is that real? Is that fake? What's going on? And then like 3 minutes later, all the national reporters came out and they said Jalen Hurts has a sprained shoulder. And this is putting his status for the Cowboys game into doubt, but it's not a long-term injury. It was really weird to me because this more or less random guy that reported about the broken collarbone, which would obviously be a more serious injury, at least 6 weeks, than the sprained shoulder. This more or less random reporter had to have known something because he reported just minutes before the national reporters did. So it is possible, especially given some of the vague language that we've gotten from the Philadelphia Eagles and from the reports coming from the national guys, it is possible that the Eagles are downplaying the injury from Jalen Hurts. And I'll tell you what, Vegas normally sniffs around and is able to tell if an injury is being downplayed. And the line on Eagles Cowboys has moved like 4 or 5 points in Dallas's favor. I think it's Dallas -5 or something right now. And the word is that Hurts is going to be doubtful, but if it is trending toward broken collarbone, like that first mysterious report said, he would definitely be out, right, against the Cowboys this weekend. And then even with a sprained shoulder, you're looking at issues for Philadelphia moving forward. Guess who had a sprained shoulder last year in the playoffs? Jimmy Garoppolo. Guess whose efficiency tanked in the playoffs with a sprained shoulder? Jimmy Garoppolo's. That Dallas game in the wild card round, Garoppolo came out red hot, right? He was completing everything, moving the ball down the field. Then Randy Gregory on that hit sprained Garoppolo's shoulder. And after that is when it got ugly for Jimmy Garoppolo. So obviously the shoulder is an important part of a quarterback's body because he's throwing the football. So if Jalen Hurts has a sprained shoulder right now, or even worse, a broken collarbone, this is massive news for the rest of the NFC. And if you look back at this playoff picture, the Eagles probably aren't going to lose 3 in a row with Gardner Minshew as their starting quarterback, even if he has to start all 3. But the Eagles are going to face a challenge in the divisional round, and that might be the Dallas Cowboys based on how the seedings are right now. And if it is the Cowboys and if it is the 49ers and the Vikings at 2 and 3, and almost certainly, will be, the Eagles have to clinch the division and that number 1 seed first. But if it's the 49ers and the Vikings dueling it out in the divisional round, well, and the Cowboys and the Eagles are dueling it out in the other divisional round, well, then you might have this 49ers versus Cowboys NFC title game. I'm not saying that's likely. I'm saying it's possible. And yes, I'm talking about this earlier than normal. But the point of this is that the 49ers have clinched their playoff berth, and this is fun. We're talking about how awesome, how epic the next month plus is going to be in the NFL. And I haven't even talked about the AFC playoff picture. Why don't we look at that really quick? The AFC playoff picture, you got the Bills and the Chiefs have punched their ticket on here on the left, automatic berths. You got the Bengals, who obviously are going to be in at 10-4, but haven't clinched a spot yet. The Tennessee Titans, the Ravens, the Chargers starting to make some noise, right? That was a hell of a throw from Justin Herbert yesterday. And obviously the Miami Dolphins are still contenders, and they're a team to be reckoned with. They went into the Bills' house in a snowy game and almost got that W. So, boy, the Patriots, until they learn how to play a little bit smarter in crunch time, can't really consider them a threat. But everybody knows the true top threats in the AFC, and those are the top three seeds right now: the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Bengals. Obviously, you could see more noise from some other teams, especially the ones that have really good quarterbacks, and I'm looking at the Chargers here at number 6. But last year, we saw an epic AFC game between the Bills and the Chiefs the day after the 49ers played the Packers, and we might see more of the same this season. In my opinion, it's going to be really, really important to track who gets that number 1 seed. And the Bills currently have the tiebreaker over the Chiefs because that 1 seed will give you the bye week. And that's why Buffalo's win was really big over the Miami Dolphins. And 49ers fans are hoping to play the Bills and not the Chiefs, should keep on cheering for Buffalo to win and maybe Kansas City to lose. Right now, Buffalo is the tiebreaker, but any advantage between these two teams, the Bills and the Chiefs, might end up tipping the AFC, and a big advantage is getting a bye in the first round of the playoffs. All right, moving on to some more 49ers news from today. 6 49ers, that is the most of any NFL team, lead their respective conference in Pro Bowl voting. So that's leading the NFC, and that is Nick Bosa for defensive ends, Trent Williams for offensive tackles, Christian McCaffrey for running backs, Kyle Juszczyk for fullbacks, George Kittle for tight ends, and Fred Warner for linebackers. All of those players lead the NFC Conference Pro Bowl fan voting, which I believe has just wrapped up. It accounts for 1/3 of the total Pro Bowl vote. So now we'll hear from NFL players and NFL coaches, and we'll see who ends up making the Pro Bowl. But the 49ers in the fan voting portion got more cumulative votes for their players than any other team in the NFL. And, you know, I think all 6 names listed below me are fair Pro Bowl vote recipients. And the fact that the 49ers have the most names out of any team, Minnesota is second with 5. This just shows how good this San Francisco 49ers team is. They are loaded with talent, and it's fitting that they have 6 more than anybody else, thanks to their midseason addition of Christian McCaffrey. Because since McCaffrey has entered the 49ers full-time lineup, the 49ers have been both the number 1 offense and the number 1 defense. DVOA, EPA per play, any way that you look at this, the 49ers have topped the league charts. And that is why people sitting here watching this show, commenting on my Twitter, I'm getting a lot of tweets that are saying, oh man, this could be our year, from 49ers fans. Our year, this is getting that vibe. Well, yeah, duh. This team has been the best in the NFL by a head and shoulders amount since Christian McCaffrey entered that starting lineup. And, you know, he's sensational just because he's the perfect piece to encourage improvement in complementary football. And we'll talk about that right now. The first thing that McCaffrey has done is change the way that Kyle Shanahan can call games, because quarterbacks can change the way they play the game. We've seen it both with Jimmy Garoppolo, and we had a before and after comparison with Garoppolo, and now we've seen it with Brock Purdy. We didn't have a before comparison for Brock Purdy. He's only played with McCaffrey. But with Garoppolo, you saw way more off-schedule stuff, and you saw fewer interceptions, and you saw way more comfort in the pocket the minute that Christian McCaffrey arrived, right? That Rams game is when we saw the full dosage of snaps for Christian McCaffrey, and that was the first time I'm like, oh my God, Garoppolo's doing some awesome stuff going off schedule. And it's because he's got this symbiotic relationship with Christian McCaffrey. One guy knows where the quarterback's going to go with the ball. And I mean, that touchdown that they threw at SoFi Stadium was awesome. Then I should say the one that Jimmy Garoppolo threw to Christian McCaffrey, because if I say the touchdown that they threw, I'm not being specific enough, because McCaffrey threw one in that game to Brandon Ayuk. But McCaffrey, the safety valve that he has created in the pass game, cannot be underestimated because it just helps in such a domino effect fashion. These quarterbacks, because McCaffrey knows exactly where to be while they're in the pocket, know that they have that outlet. And then B, they know that if they start scrambling, improvising a bit, that McCaffrey is still going to be that outlet. And then it just creates spacing for everybody else to be an outlet. It has made the 49ers offense substantially better to the point where before they had McCaffrey, they were averaging 20 points per game. After they've had McCaffrey, the 49ers are averaging 28 points per game. That is a massive difference. That is usually covers the margin between defeat and victory in the NFL. And lo and behold, the 49ers, after starting this season 3-4, are 7-0. McCaffrey, not to mention, has also helped the 49ers rushing attack. And if your rushing attack is strong in Kyle Shanahan's system, well, everything is going to kind of lead from that, right? Because Kyle Shanahan loves the football. Defensively, well, you can say that the 49ers have been holding the football more effectively, and that's helped the defense. But I think even more than that, the defense just got healthy. And it just so happened to get healthy at the same time that Christian McCaffrey entered the starting lineup, which is why you see the 49ers offense at number one and the defense at number one, and which is why it's completely fair to be talking about these 49ers as Super Bowl contenders, and it's fair to talk about the NFC playoffs because they've earned it. They've been playing so well over the past month. All right, Brock Purdy comps. I saw some stuff on Twitter today because the 49ers are playing Washington next week. And it was just funny what I read. The comps were like, okay, Washington's coming in. Brock Purdy. Oh, he reminds me a lot of Taylor Heineke. And I'm like, wait, what? Why? Just because you think that these are two physically limited quarterbacks? They're both, 6 feet tall or so? Beyond that, like, what is similar between Brock Purdy and Taylor Heineke as far as performance goes? You saw Heineke last night. They scored 12 points against the number 29 ranked defense in the New York Giants. Brock Purdy's been a top 5 efficiency guy. I mean, Brock Purdy's start has been meteoric. Taylor Heineke is ranked number 25 in efficiency in DVOA. So Purdy's top 5, Heineke's number 25. To compare Brock Purdy to Taylor Heineke right now is insulting to Brock Purdy. Now, I get it. The sample size for Brock Purdy is still really small. I've been saying that all along. So he could regress, but I always give guys the benefit of the doubt until they regress. I'm like, show me that you aren't the player that you've put on tape here over the first 3 weeks. Once adjustments and counter adjustments happen, I'm not going to assume that you're not that player. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to wait, but I'm not going to say that you're Taylor Heineke right now. Again, Heineke is this journeyman. He's 29 years old. He entered the league back in 2015. Extremely small school, went to Old Dominion. Brock Purdy, 4-year FBS starter, Iowa State, 22-year-old rookie who's been gangbusters in his first 3 game action appearances. I can't say first 3 starts because that first game against the Miami Dolphins wasn't a start for Brock Purdy. But let's not insult Brock Purdy right now. What we're seeing is awesome from Brock Purdy. I put the EPA up there the other day. He's, past 5 years, the 113 drop back sample size for Brock Purdy has him in the top 5 of all quarterbacks in the NFL. Another take I saw today, it's like, oh, well, Brock Purdy doing that well must mean that what Jimmy Garoppolo did was easy. It's like, no, it doesn't mean that. It means that Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo are both potentially really good quarterbacks. That is the story here. The story is that the 49ers this season have had 2 top 5 efficiency quarterbacks come from their backup room. Because Trey Lance hasn't put up top 5 efficiency yet. Way too small of a sample for me to judge Trey, but it's about the size of Purdy's sample, right? Hasn't been top 5 efficiency. The other guys the 49ers tossed in there in the Shanahan era weren't even close. So far, you have had 2 QBs attain that, and that's Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy. Well, for whatever reason, Garoppolo and Purdy, and I think we know a lot of the reasons, right? The release, the short range accuracy, those 2 guys have fit enough within Shanahan's scheme to make the top 5 comparisons work. So if there's a comp that you want to make for Brock Purdy right now, it's not Taylor Heineke. The comp is Jimmy Garoppolo. The efficiency with Garoppolo, it's a little bit worse than Garoppolo's, but I get it. Purdy's still a rookie, and there are differences between their styles of play, but there's also a ton of similarities that have ensured that the 49ers have seen a seamless transition here. Purdy's got a quick release, right? Jimmy Garoppolo, obviously a quick release. Both good against the blitz because of that quick release. Short range accuracy has been good, but more than anything, both of these guys are short range gunslingers, which is really rare. Normally, the gunslingers like Brett Favre, he's going to be on intermediate part of the field, maybe heave it deep a little bit more. A lot of, you see a lot of the big name quarterbacks this year really airing it out. Garoppolo and Purdy, they don't do that, right? They're not airing it out 50 yards downfield every snap. These guys are taking chances over the middle of the field to set up yak, and they're using their quick releases and their confidence in their throwing ability, because they can still put some mustard on the football to hit those receivers in stride over the middle of the field. It's no accident that a lot of Jimmy Garoppolo's interceptions over the middle of the field before this season, obviously, because he wasn't throwing that many this season, but a lot of his interceptions looked exactly like the pass that Quandre Diggs almost broke up against, almost intercepted. He did break it up, almost intercepted against Brock Purdy. So the best Brock Purdy comp is the best news for the 49ers right now. It's Jimmy Garoppolo. He's faster than Jimmy Garoppolo, and the release might not be quite as quick. And obviously he's not as experienced, so the range of outcomes is a little bit bigger. But Purdy is, because he's faster and because he's better throwing on the run than Garoppolo, may give the 49ers a lot of the stuff that Jimmy has given them, but with a little bit more upside, because Kyle Shanahan can run more bootlegs and stuff. But get out of here with the Taylor Heineke comparisons. Those are straight up insulting to Brock Purdy. Again, Heineke's number 25 in efficiency this year. We're dealing with something a lot more special when it comes to Brock Purdy's first 3 NFL games, or first 3 appearances of extended NFL action. Yesterday, I talked about 49ers in Washington, and I said that the 49ers were 6.5-point favorites. Last I checked today, that number's up to 7.5. And I think it's a totally fair number. I think it should be 8.5 pretty soon. Washington is here. This is their DVOA profile, or at least it was before the game yesterday. I may need to update this too. But number 27 offense, I just talked about Heineke beating a number 25 quarterback. It hasn't been impressive this year. Didn't impress me last night. The defense has moderately impressed me, and that's going to be the challenge for Brock Purdy, probably the best defense that he has faced, including Tampa Bay, who was missing their 2 starting safeties, and a decent special teams, number 4 for Washington. So will the 49ers be tested? Yes, but it's hard for me to believe that Washington will ultimately have enough firepower to overcome them, because that offense just isn't very good. All right, Monday Night Football, about 18 minutes. Coming up soon. One thing I'm wondering about is Chase Young. One more thing about Taylor Heineke. You look at this Washington offense. Ron Rivera today came out and said, this is a wild quote. Let me find it. Find Ron Rivera's quote. We know all about protecting quarterbacks and a coach making sure he says all the right things. That's usually the case when it comes to head coaches talking about QBs in the NFL. Well, just listen to what Ron Rivera said about a potential QB change. He was asked about a QB change for Washington. He said, quote, "Stick with Taylor and what we're trying to establish. It is something, to be quite frank, I do have to think about at some point. But if we get back on track and play the way we played and do the things we've done, then we'll stick where we are." Ron Rivera literally said about Taylor Heineke, I do have to think about a QB switch at some point. That's a quote. He literally said that. So, yeah, that definitely isn't happening with the way that Brock Purdy is playing right now, but plus everybody's hurt. But the other QB for Washington is Carson Wentz. You have to be struggling a bit if they're going to consider replacing you with Carson Wentz, because Carson Wentz isn't any good. So, Washington is not in a good spot offensively. You see it there at the bottom of the screen. 49ers should have enough to overpower them. I think the key matchup in this game, because we know Washington's defense can come to play, is that Washington pass rush against Purdy and the 49ers O-line. And, part of that equation is just Chase Young, Nick Bosa's former teammate at Ohio State, if he does indeed see his first action in over a year. But I do have to say that Brock Purdy and the 49ers quarterback room is a Hollywood script. So it's fitting that the play to George Kittle, the double pump fake, was called Hollywood. But just think about it. Like, when you think about teamwork and you think about great storylines and redemption and unexpected returns, the 49ers would not be where they are right now. And that is 10-4 with a chance to grab the number 2 seed in the NFC, headed to the playoffs for sure, NFC West champions. They wouldn't be where they are right now if they didn't have phenomenal quarterback depth. The type of depth that you only see in movies, right? Starter Trey Lance goes down in week 2. 49ers get excellent play from Jimmy Garoppolo, and now they're getting excellent play from QB3, Brock Purdy, even despite an oblique injury in the clinching game at Seattle. That's wild. That's the story of the NFL season this year. The 49ers have gotten such good play from their backup quarterbacks entering the season. To me, that's the Hollywood script. And then you tack on all the stuff about Brock Purdy, 22-year-old rookie, Mr. Irrelevant. I mean, either way, we know the 49ers are going to be really well set up in the QB room next year with who they currently have under contract, and that's Purdy and Trey Lance, two rookies on cheap deals. Probably let them battle it out, but you let this season play out before you figure out exactly what that pecking order is going to be. And with Brock Purdy playing really well right now, it's extremely exciting. And given the fact that this has been moving like a Hollywood script, you can't rule out Jimmy Garoppolo for at least this season, right? Depending on how that bone heals. So it is just awesome what we are seeing right now. The 49ers playing the best football in the league, even despite the fact that they're on their third quarterback. And to me, that's a credit to their second and their third quarterbacks and how well they're playing. Obviously the play caller and the talent is a huge part of everything, but you don't get the type of efficiency that the 49ers have gotten from the QB position without really good play from those individual quarterbacks. And it's funny to me that both Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo share some of those same skill sets, and that's actually been a big time boon for the 49ers as they've made what looks to be a seamless transition. But Washington is on deck, and Washington is not going to die easily, especially, they should be desperate coming off that loss yesterday against the New York Giants. The Commanders are 7-6-1, currently on that playoff bubble. They're, right on the they're in the last seed right now, number 7. Seahawks knocking on the door behind them. So are the Detroit Lions, and the Detroit Lions are playing better than any of the teams that I just mentioned. So people have to look out for them. All right, let's take a few questions. And then after we take the questions, we will go watch Monday Night Football, which is starting in about 15 minutes. Bob Johnson. I can only see Garoppolo coming back if Purdy gets injured or completely melts down, assuming he's healthy enough to play. Yeah, probably. Right now, the benefit that the 49ers have is they can field the deep quarterback room next year on 2 cheap rookie deals. Garoppolo, the problem is he's going to be really expensive in all likelihood. Maybe he doesn't play again this year and that price goes down, but enough for the 49ers to really be able to handle that, even with 2 good, cheaper options available. That's the thing. That's the cost benefit analysis in all of this. But let's just let it play out so we could see exactly what the setup looks like entering the offseason. Jason Gunn asks, some suggested resting guys in lieu of playing for the number 2 or the number 1. Can you explain a bit on the advantages of home field advantage or the advantages of not flying across country for an early game? Well, number 1 to me seems out of the question. Yeah, you could keep on playing just in case you get it. If you could get number 1, as long as number 1 is remotely on the table, of course you can keep on gunning for. Number 1 is a huge advantage because you get an automatic win, right? Getting the number 1 means a playoff win because you have the bye. You don't play in round 1, in the wild card round. Number 2, in my opinion, has a massive benefit too, though, because you're going to get at number 3, you're going to get a home game, but at number 2, you're going to get a home game as well. But then that second game against the Vikings probably is going to be at home and not in Minnesota. Minnesota's been a very lucky team this year. Weird stuff has happened in that dome. I get it. Playing in the dome wouldn't have weather issues, but do you really want to play Minnesota in the dome, or do you want to play them at Levi's? I think the way the 49ers are built, a lot of defense, loud crowd noise for the defense, and a rookie quarterback, assuming he's still in there at that time, you'd rather play the game at home. You saw what they did to Minnesota and Kirk Cousins in 2019. So the 2, playing for the 2 gives you that, right? It gives you that game at home instead of having to travel. And then, potentially, depending on what else happens, you could get the benefit of the number 1 seed as far as an NFC title game at home if you have a good enough seed because somebody upsets the Philadelphia Eagles. So number 2, you'd be guaranteed that, right? If you're the 2 seed, if the Eagles are upset by somebody like the Cowboys, you're playing 3 home games at Levi's Stadium. If the 49ers make it deep into the playoffs, would Garoppolo back up Purdy? Well, it all depends on Garoppolo's return timeline, right? I reported really extensively on that with as much information that we had at the time of the injury. That was right after the fracture. You talk to the orthopedist, talk to all the sources, and optimism that Jimmy Garoppolo could be healthy and come back this season. But then you just have to let it rest, because then the fracture has to start healing. And you can't really check in to see how the fracture is healing until a couple weeks down the line. We're exactly 2 weeks away from the time of the fracture. I would say, so maybe not a couple weeks, maybe a few weeks. I would say about 3 weeks, 4 weeks down the road is when you could start saying, okay, hey, how's that fracture healing? When is Jimmy Garoppolo going to be ready? And then once you have the timeline of his return, you start looking at how Brock Purdy is playing. How's the offense functioning? I could tell you right now, they're a little bit less efficient without Jimmy Garoppolo, but Purdy's doing a hell of a job. So I don't know where it's going to be once the wild card round hits, once the divisional round hits. Purdy is still, in many ways, an unknown commodity as far as how he's going to navigate through some of the lows of the quarterback position, which will certainly at some point come. So what is important is to look at the quarterback room as the running back room. Same thing. QB depth is what you absolutely should cherish and want, and that's how Shanahan is looking at it. He's looking at this as, I want to have as many capable quarterbacks as possible, because I know that even Brock Purdy can get hurt. He played hurt the other day against Seattle, and having as many capable QBs as possible will maximize your chances of advancing through the playoffs and all the way to the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl if you're the 49ers. So Jimmy Garoppolo is potentially part of that mix. Brock Purdy is obviously in that mix right now. And they're trying to get Trey Lance as healed as possible, so maybe even Trey Lance can get some practice time in this year. They've ruled him out from playing, but, this should all be viewed collectively. Everybody's going into camps. They're like, okay, I'm Team Lance. I'm Team Garoppolo. I'm Team Purdy. It's not working that way. 49ers don't look at it that way. They look at it as, look at this. We've got this amazing quarterback room. And the only reason we're still in the position that we are, which is playing like the best team in football on our third quarterback, is because we've invested in this quarterback room over the course of the season. James asks, what are the rules for max moves from IR to practice squad roster? This seems unnecessarily restrictive for teams. Or why are there rules? Well, the reason why there are rules is, and thank you, James, is because they used to have rules all the time, so teams wouldn't be able to shuffle guys and kind of play chess with, or Tetris, I guess I should say, with their roster, because then, you kind of cheat a little bit. But they had to relax those rules during the COVID seasons because too many guys were landing on the COVID list and you had to bring in new players. So, too many transactions were happening. So now they've moved back to something that really makes you strategize and limit it a bit. So you can't just be stashing guys on IR, bringing guys in off the street. You only have those 8 returns from IR. So the 49ers have used 6 of 8. Should the league add more? Potentially, since the injury rate is crazy around the whole league. But that's just the thought process behind it, just trying to make sure that nobody is trying to pull a fast one using those rules. What is the timeline for Elijah Mitchell's return? The playoffs, right on the playoffs, wild card division round. Are there any free agent mercenary types the 49ers would sign for a playoff run? Janoris Jenkins might be one of those. They already signed him. It just depends. I mean, it really depends on what position they need. Right now, I don't think they need anybody, right? Janoris Jenkins was the corner depth they needed. Somebody gets hurt somewhere, and yes, you can go for him. But right now, they don't have a need. How does defensive tackle depth look? Do the 49ers need practice squad? They added Michael Dwumford to their practice squad. Jawan Kinlaw's practice window should open tomorrow. They do expect Kevin Givens back this year, probably around the playoffs. Obviously, Kinlaw would help immensely. They did just lose Hassan Ridgeway. He's on IR. I mean, it's tough. It's tough stuff. So we'll see. That Armstead's return is massive, 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 for the reason that defensive tackle is probably the thinnest position group on the roster right now, given the injuries. We'll see if that improves moving forward. All right, I'm about to wrap this up. Maybe another question or two. Then it's time for Monday Night Football, Rams and the Packers. And I'm going to be back on after Monday Night Football tonight. So we'll talk a little bit more. But hopefully you guys are enjoying the show. Make sure you're subscribing to The Athletic right there. Check me out on Twitter. We had such a fun weekend of football, and we have such a fun month coming up. I really can't wait. Good to be back in the city, too. Took the train all the way back from the Central Valley today. I got to work on Christmas Eve, guys. 49ers are playing Washington. So I can't be back at home. I had to see mom, dad, grandma, everybody back home in Visalia. Really foggy there in the valley. I'm sure a lot of you from the valley watching this. Took the train back though because I flew straight from Seattle to Fresno. Train today, Hanford to Richmond. Got on BART at Richmond. That you make the transfer. Took BART straight into San Francisco. Now I may go check out the Packers bar because I don't think the Rams have a bar. So it's because it's the Rams. They don't have many fans. The Packers definitely have fans. They appreciate my last name when I go to the Packers bar. So go and check that out. It's fun to be back in the city. Seems kind of empty right now, though. A lot of people probably already away for Christmas and all that. All right, two more questions. Let's see what you guys got. Will Charvarius Ward be out? I don't know. We're gonna find out from Kyle Shanahan tomorrow where Charvarius Ward is in the concussion protocol. So we will see. No news on any injuries yet because the 49ers haven't practiced yet. It was a player's day off today. Tomorrow, the news will start rolling again. That's why last couple of days of shows have been more NFL oriented. I've been talking more about the 49ers' chances in general because the team has taken some time to rest. I don't rest, but the team has taken some time to rest. So just go from there. I don't think Kinlaw's going to play. I think Kinlaw, they're trying to get into practice. I don't think that I think he's going to have to practice for a couple of weeks before he plays, potentially. Debo return, I'd say, they said 3-ish weeks. So I'd say maybe the Arizona game, put him on a pitch count, get him ready for the playoffs so he's not cold turkey in the playoffs. How does the 49ers defense match up with the Eagles offense? Well, I'll tell you what. The Eagles have a good O-line and good receivers. This all depends on who's playing QB for the Eagles, though. If it's Jalen Hurts, he can run a little bit. If it's Gardner Minshew, yeah, he can move a bit, but I don't, it totally changes the Eagles offense. That's why today's news was so big. All right, everybody, thank you. Make sure that you check me out online everywhere. It's been a fun show, and go enjoy Monday Night Football. Baker Mayfield, the Rams against the Packers. We'll talk to everybody soon. Thanks again.